마쳤습니다.
Hello everyone, welcome back to another exciting episode of Fastcuts. Today we have come up with a 2002 South Korean comedy film, Jailbreakers. We are pretty sure that this box office hit will not disappoint you.
Jailbreakers is a comedy movie about the story of two escaped convicts trying to break back into jail. The film, starring Sol Kaing-gu, Cha Seung-won, and Son Yoon-ah, is directed by Kim Sang-jin. Quite after some research, the two long-term prisoners finally managed to break out of jail. After reaching some distance far off from the jail, the two escaped convicts came to realize a fact that urged them to get back to the jail. The funny actions followed by this are shown admirably in the film. The film begins by showing the night ambience of the jail, where the guards there were in the middle of a conversation. One of the guards was complaining about the facilities provided to the prisoners, like food and clothes. He also mentioned that whatever is given, they aren't going to get right. The guard also questioned whether any one of the convicts would try to escape after knowing about the hardships to break into such a jail. Straight after this conversation, the next scene portrays a person digging out of a hole using a spoon. The next scene begins with Choi. His life before getting into jail is explained briefly. While working and living his life peacefully, he got into an accident that injured his legs and made him difficult to work. During his hardship days, when he roamed with hunger, he noticed some sacks at a bakery. Without any second thought, he began to eat from them. The shop owner tried to catch him, but Choi pushed him and ran. However, he was caught by the police the very next moment. Despite he was caught stealing food, he was prisoned for using fake ID. This broke his heart. From then on, he tried a lot to break out of jail. He tried to jump out of the jail walls using a long stick. That try went in vain. He also tried to escape through a van, which also flopped. Whatsoever, he tried again. His next try was to get out by climbing the wall, which failed too, due to the electricity cable. Due to all these actions, his imprisonment was extended from 1 year and 2 months to 8 years. In the next scene, we can see Choi speaking a lot about God and his beliefs, but his actual hope was a spoon which he got while working in the surroundings. Followed by this, we can see the inside of a jail where we could see prisoners are taught mechanical and computer classes. Yoo Ja is introduced in the next scene. He is sincerely working as he came to know about the new chief taking charge. As soon as the chief left, he planned to ask things to the officers secretly. He inquired about the amnesty list to be published on Independence Day. The officers said no at first, but later yelled at him as he keeps on asking. Then the chief enters, and Yoo Jae is left with disappointment. Later the chief started to shout at the officers that they should act more responsibly and remember that the jail is not a resort, but is to treat the prisoners as animals. The next scene shows Yoo Jae singing the song Pink Lipstick, but his fellow prisoners started to scold him and reminded him to not sing this song anymore. The fellow prisoner also teased him about pleading with the officer. Yoo Ja replied by mocking Choi by saying that his efforts are far better than Choi's hope in a spoon. This made the prisoners angry, and they were on the verge of thrashing Yoo Jae, but Choi told them not to. In the next scene, we can see officers taking attendance of the prisoners. Meanwhile, Yoo Jae teases Choi about his plans. The police shouted at the jailers as they caught some pictures and playing cards in the cell while searching. As soon as the police left, Choi's fellow mates told him to execute the plan soon before the tattooed guy leaves. The next scene portrays a tattooed prisoner who was jailed alone in a cell. In the next scene, we could see Choi repairing a car and getting praised for fixing it. Here comes the tattoo guy. He angrily mentioned the incident where he was jailed alone in a prison, despite both of them getting into a fight. In the next scene, we could see Yoo Jae running off to see his visitor. The visitor was no one but his girlfriend Jaeyoung Suno. Yoo Jae praised her looks and said that she looked like an actress. "Would you get out of jail on this independence?" asked Jaeyoung Suno. Yoo Jae said that he was so close, but the officers forgot to add up his name. Jaeyoung Suno said that she is going to get married. Yoo Jae surprisingly told her that it was impossible to marry her, so wait for some time. She said that she is going to get married to someone else on the 15th, and she's fed up with waiting for him. This made Yoo Jae angry, but she left. At the very next moment, we could see Yu-jae pleading to officers to get him to bail for at least some hours. This made the officer aggressive and hit him. In the next scene, we could see the inside of the jail. The fellow prisoners of Choi were preparing for his escape. A long tunnel is shown in the next scene that was dug out by Choi over the past 6 years. Choi began his journey. Just after seeing this, Yu-jae went near Choi and started to ask to take him along the tunnel, but Choi denied it abruptly. This made Yu-jae angry, and he started to call the officers, but the fellow prisoners covered him up. The next scene shows the chief getting to know about the visit of the Judicial Committee and Legislative Council member to the jail. The guy next to the chief also mentioned his efforts to make them visit the chief's jail, and also his promotion. Then we could see Choi coming back from the tunnel and calling out Yu-jae to join him. Some moment after their journey, Yu-jae started to complain about the tunnel's path getting narrower. This triggered Choi and asked him whether his mom is really in trouble. Yu-jae told that his mother died 10 years before itself. Later on, they started to notice water drops coming into the tunnel. It was raining outside, and Choi started to dig their path. Quite after some time, they saw the end of the tunnel and got out of it. They expressed their happiness and enjoyed it. Then Yu-jae asked Choi about his plans. Choi replied that he has nothing to do. Choi also said that he did all of this just to experience freedom. Then we could see both of them going towards a cloth shop. At that time they saw a police vehicle passing. As soon as it left, they stole a pair of dresses for them. At the railway station, they came to know that there were no trains scheduled for that day. Meanwhile, Yu-jae mentioned about Choi's zero efforts of setting fake IDs and cars. In the next scene, we could see them taking a ride in a car. Policeman who drove the car was tied up in a closed space. During the ride, Yu-jae mocked Choi and asked what else he knew other than digging out a tunnel. After a point, Yu-jae stopped the car and woke Choi up. They planned to part ways. Yu-jae bought a cigar and smoked peacefully, but he shockingly came to know the news about amnesty in the newspaper. Meanwhile, Choi was walking down the road and stood near a bakery. He asked the price for a piece of bread and paid for a couple of those. As eating them, Choi wept by remembering the day he was caught. At the very next moment, Yu-jae ran towards Choi and showed him his newspaper. Both of them went mad when they came to know that both of their names were on the amnesty list, which is a list of prisoners to be freed on the day of independence. They threw away the bakery stuff vigorously. In the next scene, the officers came to know that Yu-jae and Choi left. They yelled at each other. One of the officers mentioned that they was about to tell them the news about Independence Day. The fellow officer also replied to the questions that they can't find people leaving underground. Shortly, the officers came back from the tunnel and said that the passage is blocked halfway due to heavy rain and a landslide. This made them think of the possibility that the two of the convicts got dead due to a landslide. But later, police informed that he found traces of them escaping to the other end of the tunnel. The police ordered them to start questioning the prisoners. However, his close friend admitted that he knew their details. In the next scene, the prisoner was taken by an officer in his car. Despite his promises, he was cuffed. Yu-jae called to the police station. He asked why they didn't mention the amnesty list before. Choi took out the phone and asked what was their next plan. The police asked them to come back and said they wouldn't file a case. Choi agreed to return, but Yu-jae denied. Yu-jae said that he had some work to finish off, but the police said that if they were returning, both of them must come. Thus Choi started to request Yu-jae to come with him. While cleaning the premises of the tunnel, the officer asked his mate about his hair grooming methods, and the fellow officer said that it was expensive. Finish the work quickly, said the senior officer. He also handed the clothes of the prisoners to the officers, and asked them to act as prisoners when the chief comes. During the inspection, the chief complained about the hairstyles of the prisoners. The police replied that the prisoners were given little freedom inside the cell. The chief ordered to get a barber and give proper haircuts to the prisoners. Before leaving, he also ordered to get the prisoners ready to welcome the members of the assembly. In the next scene, we could see Jaeon-sun in her restaurant. She was getting ready to do shopping with her fiancé, but Yu-jae arrived there. He threw a lot of stuff at her violently. He took out a knife and threatened her to die alongside him. Choi arrived there and tried to calm things down. As the fight progresses, police entered the scene. It was the Jaeon-sun's fiancé. He took out his pistol and pointed it at Yu-jae, but Jaeon-sun told him that Yu-jae was her ex-boyfriend. Three of them had a conversation for a few minutes while Choi waited outside. Yu-jae angrily left the restaurant. Later, Yu-jae and Choi got onto the car. Yu-jae was still ferocious. Choi insisted Yu-jae return to the prison, but once again Yoo-jae refuses. Yoo-jae began to think of the old days when Jaeon-sun sang the song Pink Lipstick. After the song ended, Yoo-jae proposed her to marry him. He was caught by the police during this. Yoo-jae took back the car to the restaurant. He came to know that she left. During this, the jail premises are cleaned up. Also, the prisoner and the police officer roamed through different places to find Choi and Yoo-jae. They were ordered to keep an eye on them. The chief was planning to plant trees and plants around the jail. Jaeon-sun was wearing the wedding dress. At that moment, Yoo-jae arrived there. Choi along Yoo-jae took her to the car. The fiancé saw this. Choi's fellow prisoner and the policeman were watching all of this. Jaeon-sun bit Yoo-jae to escape. Choi hit her, but Yoo-jae scolded him for that. Jaeon-sun was crying, and Choi insisted that she stop it. Choi said that he is going back to prison, and nothing can stop him from it. He also mentioned about his efforts of escaping the tunnel just using a spoon. Meanwhile, the tattooed prisoner was so frustrated and hungry. It was their lunchtime, but the officers gave them the next work. Yoo-jae stopped the car and went to buy clothes for Jaeon-sun. Choi and Jaeon-sun were inside the car. While Choi attended a phone call, Jaeon-sun escaped from the car. However, Choi managed to catch her. Both of them got into a fight. As they got into the car, she told Yoo-jae to leave her with the fiancé and told him that he was of a good character. Yoo-jae questioned her genuinely. However, both of them didn't like Choi getting in between the talks. Meanwhile, the prisoners with the tattoo guy up front protested against the actions of the officers. The tattooed guy was again put in the cell. During the car ride, Jaeon-sun said to Yoo-jae that if it was somebody else, he would have already left, but Yoo-jae replied that there is no one for him other than her, and blamed her for all the problems. Jaeon-sun cleverly messaged to her fiancé about the locations. The fiancé, police officer, took his car and went away. The police and the prisoner also followed him. In the prison, the prisoners managed to complete their work and get ready for lunch, but then the senior officer again gave them work. The officer dressed up as a prisoner along with other prisoners questioned him. The officer ordered to put the prisoners in one jail as the junior officer said that solitary confinement is filled up. In the next scene, we could see the arrival of assembly members at the jail. The prisoners were fighting each other. Meanwhile, Choi, Yoo-jae, and Jaeon-sun were having their food at a restaurant. As soon as Choi saw the spoon, he felt nostalgia. Jaeon-sun started to narrate her love story to Yoo-jae. The story was about the fiancé singing Pink Lipstick, and also that she liked him so much once she came to know that he was a policeman. As the story ended, Choi was seen crying because of nostalgia. The fiancé, the prisoner, and the policeman too arrived there. A whole police force was waiting for them. The jail officer along with the prisoner informed this to Yoo-jae. Yoo-jae tried to run away with her. At this time, the jail officer and the prisoner consciously hit the police car and made problems. Jaeon-sun ran to her fiancé. Yoo-jae and Choi managed to escape through the back door. Meanwhile, in the jail, the prisoners made noise and called an officer. They said that one of the prisoners had stomach pain. As the officer opened up the door, they attacked him and ran out of the prison. They went on breaking the doorways. As the assembly members did the inspection, the alarm sounded. The chief said it was due to a technical error. Besides this, Yoo-jae jumped from a building, but was fortunately safe from serious injuries. They ran to a hospital and took an ambulance from there. In the jail, protests began to reach their peak. Several police forces were deployed to suppress the protest. Water cannons were used. One of the guards informed the chief, who was with the assembly members. However, the chief managed to take the members to the other section of the jail. The prisoners fought back against the officers using emergency units, and then they broke the gate and reached the front premises of the jail. The police fired into the air. This made the assembly members feel like there is something wrong happening around. As they went to check outside, the guard stopped them. The police were threatening the prisoners using a gun, but the tattooed prisoner took a gun from one of the officers and pointed it at him. He demanded the police officers put down the guns. Meanwhile, Yoo-jae and Choi were finding their jail clothes. In the next scene, we could see the tattooed guy forcing the officers to the inside of the jail, where the chief and members were standing. The fiancé demanded Jaeon-sun to leave by train, as he is going to return only after catching Yoo-jae and Jaeon-sun. This made Jaeon-sun question his love for her, but he forced her to get out of the car. Meanwhile, Yoo-jae and Choi passed by them. The fiancé chased them, but the prisoner and policeman in the car stopped him. The fellow prisoner asked about having food for the tattoo guy. All the officers and assembly members were in control of them. Choi started digging the tunnel to get back to jail. Yoo-jae asked him is going to do this as he dug up the other tunnel in 6 years. Choi got entrapped in mud, and Yu-jae managed to pull him back. The prisoners were having food in front of the officers. He also mentioned that even cattle are given food for their work, and all of this wouldn't happen if they were given food on time. On the other side, Yu-jae and Choi failed again in attempting to escape through another tunnel that was connected to the jail shower. One of the assembly members reached the tattooed guy and said he was a prisoner, jailed for fraudulence. The tattooed guy told him to sit with them. Yu-jae and Choi couldn't find anyone near the jail, so Choi started to dig again. On seeing this, Yu-jae asked if that is what you do all the time. Choi then came up with the idea of breaking the wall with the ambulance, but that failed too. The assembly members started to confess their mistakes to the prisoners. Choi and Yu-jae were fighting in frustration. Later, he bought a truck to break the wall, but the fiancé suddenly came up there and pointed the gun at them. He took them to the police car. He tortured Yu-jae because of a personal grudge. Jaeon-sun was watching all of this nearby. On seeing all of this, Choi and Jaeon-sun started to fight against the fiancé. Meanwhile, the chief also confessed and got onto the tattooed guy's side. Choi and Yu-jae decided to take the car inside of the jail using some sort of setup. This time they succeeded. Meanwhile, the tattooed guy is planning to kill the officers who joined on his side. Meanwhile, Yu-jae and Choi broke the gate and reached inside. Choi said to security that they returned as they promised. The tattooed guy demanded them to get out of the car. Choi got onto the tattooed guy and fought. Yu-jae stood up against the other prisoners who were about to fire. Yu-jae tried to stop the mess happening around there. The inspectors promised that they would just ignore what happened around there if they stopped it. The chief also promised them this. The prisoners dropped their guns. However, Choi was still in the fight with the tattooed guy. The tattooed guy pushed him away and fired. He said that he doesn't believe the officers and left with the other prisoners. One of the officers inquired about Yu-jae and Choi. The guard replied that they were the ideal prisoners there, and that they were on the list for amnesty. In the next scene, we could see the prisoners who were freed on Independence Day. Choi in his style celebrated it. Jaeon-sun was there to welcome Yu-jae and handed him a cake. Choi was still in his celebrations, screaming out loud. Yu-jae put that cake in his mouth. In the next scene, we could see a bakery run by Yu-jae, Choi, and Jaeon-sun. We could also see them going out on a vacation. One of the tourists there invited them to sing a song. Choi started to sing Pink Lipstick. Yu-jae noticed that Jaeon-sun was getting romantic. Yu-jae suddenly rushed to Choi and interrupted. The movie ends by showing the three of them quarreling. Hope everyone has enjoyed the movie. If you haven't subscribed to our channel yet, please consider doing it and turn on the bell icon. Post your valuable opinion as comments. Till we meet again, bye!